1. Please be aware the following story contains one brief, minor reference to animal cruelty. One of my friends, we'll name her Stacy, invited me and some other girls over to her house that was out of the locality. She said that she had a mental asylum in her town, and that some really creepy things happened in there. And given that one girl that was invited, Francisca, owned a Ouija board, we decided to bring that with us too. We have tried the Ouija board before, but it never actually worked. After one failed session, the girl Francisca had heard weird tapping noises coming from inside her closet, and saw a shadow stand next to her. But when she turned around, there was no one behind her. Anyways, we never worried about that as nothing more ever happened. So me, Francisca, and Diane get to Stacy's house, and soon after leave to go to the mental asylum. Quick description of the place. At the first floor of the building was the mental asylum, while at the second floor was either a factory or disco party. The place burned down multiple times, killing people in the process too. Eventually the place became abandoned. On our way we picked up some of Stacy's friends too. One of Stacy's friends scolded us for not bringing salt with us. Her mom was a witch, and she 100% believed in the paranormal. She and Stacy told us more things about what happened while they were visiting the place. They have visited the building dozens of times, so they had a lot of memories. They said that they took a lot of pictures of the place in the hope that they might have caught something on the camera. And they did. They said that an abnormally tall shadow was standing next to the door, and that it even had a face, although it did not appear to be human. Another time they saw something pitch black slithering on the floor next to them, and they said that it even left a trail before shrinking into nothing. Stacy said that at first she thought they were lying, given that she could not see the trail they were talking about. But she believed them because they all screamed at the same moment when they saw the thing. There was a room with a bunch of flies in it, but they all laid in just one corner of the room. But that's not important and could be explained. One time they asked for a sign, and seconds later, they found some boulders that were behind them arranged in a circle. She said it was too quick for someone to move them in that time span, and they would probably hear them if they moved them. They could see on the ground marks of how the boulders moved, although they couldn't see them move. Another time they saw a man with his legs backwards run from one room to another perfectly fine. The guys freaked out and ran out of the asylum. One man was found hanged inside the building 3 years ago, and Stacy said she thinks she saw him at the window. Her friend said she saw a woman at the window some other time too. One of the girls in our group said she almost died as the building suddenly caught on fire with them inside. One of the friends that was outside for a cigarette break called them and told them that the building was on fire. After they escaped, minutes later the whole thing was burning up. From what they said, the place was haunted as hell. Now back to where we were. We reached the building, and right at the entrance we are being welcomed by a dead, eviscerated rabbit that was half hidden inside a yellow bag. We make our way through and explore the building. There were some things on the ground and some blankets in a cleaned up room, meaning that some homeless people were staying there. So far nothing interesting happened. We moved through the place, and after checking everything, we settled down and bring out the Ouija board. Francisca pulls it out of the box, and along with a planchette, an icon, religious painting, falls out. Our mom must have put it in there, and Francisca gave it to me to hold it. I put it inside my pocket. We settled there as they said this is where most of the things happened, and we began playing, and weirdly it starts moving from the first question. Weirdly I was not startled by this. Anyways, we managed to find a name, Adam, and some random letters, some yes and some no. All of the girls said their hands were cold. Although outside wasn't really cold, mine weren't. Maybe because I had both a silver ring, I heard silver keep spirits away, and because I had the icon inside my pocket. After this session, we highly suspected a girl for moving the planchette, since she had a smirk throughout all the session, and it looked like she was pushing too hard on the planchette. We moved upstairs, and some girls entered a room. They said it was hard to breathe inside it, like something was pushing against their throats or chests. I entered the room, and seconds after it did feel a bit harder to breathe, like the atmosphere in the room was denser. They all entered and confirmed the same. I don't know if it was some placebo effect or not. Soon my head started aching a bit. They again played with the Ouija, and this time the girl we suspected moved the planchette didn't play no more. The planchette moved slightly this time, but only a few times. In this room, allegedly a woman burned to death due to her door not opening. The wind in this room was stronger than in any other of the rooms. Some girls said they were feeling sick when they exited the room. We got down the stairs and me and Francisca were walking in front of everyone else. This is when something really strange happened, perhaps the strangest thing that happened in that whole day. My head was slightly turned to Francisca that was behind me, but I saw something move and fall to the ground. At first, I thought it fell from the ceiling, but Francisca said someone threw a rock from around the corner. She was mad and kept asking, "Who the fuck threw a rock at us?" But then we turned around the corner and saw that there was no one standing there, and that the rest of the group was behind us or on the stairs. We were both shocked about this. But we continued forward to the place where we first tried the Ouija board. When we got there, a girl from behind us tells us, "A rock nearly hit me too. It came from the bathrooms." The bathrooms were on the corner. And we were absolutely shocked. The bathrooms were small and mostly empty, but filled with rocks, pebbles, and plastics. We would hear it if something stepped in there, and there was no one outside either. The rock that was thrown really could not be explained. The girl whose mother was a witch confirmed that this was not the first time something threw rocks at them. After this, nothing important really happened, and we all went to Stacy's house and threw a party. Sorry for the long post, but this is 100% true. Except for the stuff the girls said, which I can't confirm. I will post pictures when the girl with the witch mom finds her camera and sends the pics. And there'll be video going up on YouTube, which you'll find linked in the description of this video. Francisca said she felt a pressure in her chest, and someone following her since leaving the place, but she said it went away after 2 days. Edit. Forgot to say that at one point during the seance with the Ouija, the camera we were filming with went out of focus a couple of times in a row, like something was in front of it. A thing it had never done before. It then focused on nothing near the girls playing. 2. I've had encounters with the paranormal since I was a child. I believe that experiencing such things from a young age inevitably leads to a curiosity and fascination with the paranormal, even for those of us who would really rather not have more contact with the other side. This is how it is for me, at any rate. The experience I'm about to share was different from any other I've ever had. For you to understand the significance of these events, I have to first tell you about my friend, Mike. I first met Mike a month or 2 after he had started dating one of my dearest friends. He was a divorced father of 3, a firefighter, a paramedic, a fiercely loyal friend, and one of the best guys I've ever known. You could always depend on him if you needed a shoulder, a laugh, or very nearly anything else he was able to give you. He and my friend were together for more than 2 years. In that time she was happier than I've ever seen her, and he became a good friend to me. There was a local bar where we all liked to hang out, and where Mike could often be found playing pool on his evenings off when his girlfriend was busy with her daughter. This bar usually had very good live bands playing, so I would often stop in and have a drink while listening to the music and relaxing after work. Mike would often sneak up next to me if he saw me sitting at the bar alone, slap his open hand down on the wooden bar in front of me and tell me, jokingly, to cheer the fuck up. He always insisted that I looked depressed. There might be some amount of resting bitch face at work here, to be fair. I think he just enjoyed startling me and knew it was good for a laugh. One Tuesday afternoon in May, I got a call from Mike's girlfriend asking me to start praying. It turned out that he had been in a terrible accident while riding his motorcycle, and things looked bad. The next evening, I was at work when she sent me a text message that simply said, "Mike's gone." It took everything I had to keep it together until the end of my shift. I was working as a server at the time, and the managers felt we were too busy for me to be allowed to go home. Dead friend be damned. When I was finally able to leave, I made the 20-minute drive home with tears streaming down my face, trying not to let the crushing grief and anger overwhelm me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I parked my car, a 1994 Cadillac, which in 2011 was sort of an anomalous beast of a vehicle, turned off the engine and let it wash over me. The injustice of the loss of such a great man in a world full of assholes made me want to scream. But at the same time, I felt I could barely breathe. As I sat there in my car, my head resting on the steering wheel, openly sobbing, a sudden, deafening bang came from the trunk of my car, startling me out of my grief, if only for a moment. It sounded like something had hit the center of the trunk lid, but I couldn't figure out how. I got out, circled the car, and saw nothing. None of the trees in the yard were within 10 feet of the car, so I knew nothing had dropped out of them. There were no marks on the car, which made no sense given how hard it had seemingly been hit, and how prone it was, having an actual metal body to dents and dings. Finally, there was nothing on the ground anywhere near the car that could have hit it. Not so much as a single pine cone. As I stood there in my driveway, absolutely baffled as to what the noise could have been, I was suddenly struck by the memory of Mike's large hand, slapping down on a wooden bar and him half shouting, "Cheer the fuck up." Now I'm sure some of you might be thinking, cars make noises when they're cooling down. But I often would sit in my car having a cigarette or two, or three, and fooling around with my phone after getting home from work, and never before or again heard any sound even remotely like that one that night. My living situation at that time was pretty miserable, so my car was something of a refuge to me. I also looked in my rear and side view mirrors the moment I heard the bang, and saw no sign of any person or creature anywhere near the yard and driveway. I looked for every possible rational explanation, and found none. I don't blame anyone for being skeptical about an event they didn't witness, but I have no doubt that Mike decided to sneak up on me one last time and tell me to cheer up. 3. Sadly, what I'm about to tell you guys is true. It happened over the last year. I'm 18. My parents purchased a house wanting to move more south of Florida. We saw many beautiful houses, but they were all out of budget. The only one cheap enough was still out of range, but we managed to get it. The closing of the house took about 5 months. Every time we figured something out with the bank selling us the house, something else would pop up that would be out of the bank's control. Long story short, when we finally got the house, it had a bunch of problems. The plumbing had to be completely replaced, and the whole house had to be remodeled, so we hired a contractor and did it. Then the contractor started having problems and eventually never came back to the house, so we lost about an extra $50,000 from that. I could mention everything that went wrong, but you probably wouldn't believe it, and it's too much for me to mention. What I've been saying sounds like something that could happen to anybody, but bear with me. As the house was getting built, sometimes me and my dad would come in the night when the construction workers were gone to check on the progress. My dad is legally blind, so he's not the sharpest when it comes to spotting things. Behind the half-shut doors, I'd see things moving quickly. I'd also hear sounds such as footsteps and people talking. When we finally moved into the house about 6 months ago, my dad got terribly sick and had to get surgery. Then my mom got terribly sick and had to get surgery. From things our families have no history suffering from. Anyways, we started becoming closer with the neighbors, and then they would tell stories about the Haitian woman who lived with her husband in this house previously. I'm focusing on the woman specifically because she would practice voodoo inside the house. She tied her husband to her and made him get permanently attached. She'd also managed to put spells on people she didn't like, or people you wouldn't like by request. Nights are a nightmare. You hear things. You feel like you're getting watched intensely non-stop. And I'm not just talking watched. You feel anxious and uncomfortable from it. To the point where you feel like if you don't run, you're gonna get fucking taken to the underworld or something, by whoever or whatever is watching. Sometimes in the living room you can hear a dog whining. We own no pets. Today, one of the construction workers found a dead bird inside a light bulb. It was hidden, I think, in one of the closets where nobody could have found it. I am writing this post to see if any of you could please tell me what such a thing would mean. I wouldn't be surprised if we found something buried in the backyard, since there is obviously something evil in the house. No specific thing, but it's definitely a feeling you get when you're here. The living room TV was completely smashed, but my parents came up with the idea it just discharged, and we all chose to believe that to not face the truth that it was smashed. Because we have our house scrambled with security cameras inside and outside, nobody could have possibly broken in to just smash the TV. We occasionally find dead ravens in the backyard. How cliché. Please, if any of you know what the dead bird inside the light bulb means, tell me. I'll really appreciate it. 4. It was March 2017, the start of a new semester at college. After my first went so wrong due to breakup, depression, and general academic negligence, I was ready for a new start. My roommate and I both had our beds lofted with our desks directly underneath, giving us more space in the dorm room as a whole. While it was still somewhat cold outside, my roommate and I preferred to get fresh air in the dorm when we could. And since we both liked it colder when we slept, we'd crack the window open. This particular night I was feeling a bit more brave, and decided to open the window considerably more. That was a regret I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I was disturbed from sleep by light flooding the cracked door as my roommate got up and left to go to the bathroom. I thought nothing of it at the time, as it was almost nightly routine at this point, and closed my eyes again and tried to fall back asleep. I rolled onto my back to try to get comfier, but something was off. The atmosphere felt different. I mean, yes, the frigid air outside was clashing with the heated air of the dormitory, but that wasn't it. I was used to that. It was something else, something sinister. Annoyed and figuring I was just being paranoid, I looked around the room. I rolled my head up and glanced into the closet, checked the reflections of the mirrors in the room, and finally I looked down at my feet. That's when I saw the man, or whatever it was. It seemed to have found enjoyment in the fact I discovered its presence, because it cackled silently to itself as it moved around the side of my bed, its features becoming terrifyingly more apparent as it moved. The few times I have told this story to friends and my therapist, I have avoided using words like inhuman, exaggerated, and disproportionate. To me, they were overused, if not cliché, in the creepypastas I read during my middle school cringe era. But now, after seeing this thing, they are the only words I can use to describe it. Its eyes were a golden crimson, wild and bloodshot. I couldn't tell if they were glowing or just reflecting the light there was in the room, comparable to the Sith eyes from the Star Wars movies if I had to make a comparison. Other features became clearer as it encroached on me like a predator to its prey. Its skin was wrinkled, leathery, and pocked with what looked like age marks. Though it was hard to tell in the dark, it almost looked grey in colour. As it moved around to the head of the bed and looked down at me, I saw its crazed eyes were sunken into its skull. Hair that looked dry and coarse came off its balding head as it hovered over me. Its breath was hot and rancid to the point where my nose recoiled in disgust, and I held my own. Finally, its mouth. It was genuinely inhuman, more like a zipper running from under ear to ear that was curved upward in a malicious smile. I turned my gaze away, telling myself no, convincing myself it was only a night terror. That was until I saw him pull out a wicked-looking knife. Jagged and black as obsidian, almost shaped like if a Tibetan spirit knife and a black mistress sword have an evil-bladed child. From that point on, I just closed my eyes and began to pray to whatever deities would hear me despite never having been religious. I felt the blade of the knife touch my throat. I was shivering, whimpering like a puppy in fear. And that seemed to feed this thing, until a warm light filled the room. Instantly spun around in my bed and looked up at my roommate, who had this concerned look on his face. It wasn't until the next morning I found out it was because of fear in my eye and the tears running down my face. I asked him if he could shut and lock the window while he was up, to which he obliged before crawling back into his bunk and falling asleep. I envied him, for I had no such luck. I have only seen it one other time since then, while visiting home. I was watching videos on my phone as I tried to fall asleep, and again the atmosphere seemed off. I shut my phone off and just listened. Finally, I sat upright, and there in the closet was the creature. I had never screamed so loud in my life. I blinked and it was gone, but I'm not afraid to admit I slept on the floor in my parents' room that night. I have no idea what it was, but both cases I happened to have a window open or cracked with no screen of any sort. I do believe it had some sort of ill intent with me. Part of me was hoping Reddit could not only help me get this story off my chest, but also get some answers as to what this thing might have been. I've had one friend say it sounded reminiscent of some European folktale, but I haven't been able to confirm this claim myself, with what little research I have done. I just hope I can find answers before it ever decides to come back. 5. A couple of years ago in 9th grade, our class went to a lake near Poland for 6 days. It was in a big forest 2 hours away from the next town, and the only things around us were a huge cornfield, the lake, and a camping ground. Lucky for us, we have been here before and knew the people who owned and rented the lake house, so we got to stay there even though it's usually only rented to younger students on class trips. What makes this really cheesy is that the third day was actually Halloween. We did a night tour with a guide that night, but nothing scary happened, though I got to hold my crush's hand. Nice. So 2 days later, half the class decides that, hey, we already have flashlights with us. Let's go on our own tour to the part of the forest we didn't go through during the tour. That part started if you followed the lake down and the only street, then went right around the lake. Opposite to the entrance was a huge cornfield that none of us paid any attention to, 'cause ew, high grass, more bugs. My friend forgot her flashlight in her room, so while our group already started, I waited for her outside in the dark, scared shitless. My poor ass doesn't have a flashlight, and I wasn't about to spend the little money I had on it for a class trip to never use it again. I told myself that this is okay, whatever, this isn't some cheesy horror movie and I can still see the group from here, so none of them could sneak up on me and play a prank. I waited, and next to me, coming from the lake, I heard something moving. It slowly crept closer, but I couldn't really see anything. I brushed it off as the cat that belonged to the janitor of the house. Though a second later, I saw that cat on the other side of the street. Trying not to freak out, I turned towards the noise and stared it down. Whatever it was, I was ready for the jump scare, 'cause it certainly can't be anything bad anyways. Before the noise got too close, though, I heard my friends calling and the noise stopped. I decided not to tell her 'cause she wouldn't believe me anyways. We started coming down the street, and what I should mention is that on each side of the street was thick forest. On the right was the lake, but you could hardly see it through the trees and bushes in the dark. So we walked down the creepiest road I've ever been on, and I had the worst feeling in my stomach, like somebody was watching and it was making me panic. I asked my friend over and again to hand me the flashlight so I could just check behind us. She kept refusing, because she thought I would run away with it or do something to scare her. When we reached the entrance, she finally let me take the flashlight and look behind us. Now that flashlight is an expensive one, so bright and far-reaching you shouldn't ever shine it towards the sky, 'cause it could blind a pilot. We saw a huge black shadow just standing there not moving, at least 2.5 meters and incredibly lanky. It didn't have any clothes, or maybe it did, but they must have been skin tights, 'cause there was nothing resembling clothes on its silhouette. No facial features, hair, or anything. and even though we were actively shining light on it, it stayed completely black. We were mortified and couldn't move, but to our luck our friends came running from the forest and the thing was gone. Our friends went on about finding an abandoned shack with an old ghost lady, blah blah. Obviously a prank while they led us towards it. Me and my friend both decided not to say anything cause, again, as if they would believe us. Eventually, one of the girls reminded us to be careful of wolves, and that's when I said nope and turned around. I'm not gonna fuck with wolves in the dark where nobody can hear us scream. Fuck that. They all just kind of followed, realizing that their prank didn't work, and that it was getting late and boring anyways. We got out of the forest and looked at the cornfield across the street. Nothing unusual, just a lot of tall grass and corn. Also note that there was nothing in that field but corn and tall grass. No scarecrow or similar, and the farmers or whatever who owned this lived nowhere close. When we started walking down the road toward our house again, I had a bad feeling, so I looked at the crops, and there it was again. A black, inhumanly lanky figure. This one was much taller than the other one, and like the other one, unmoving. Not breathing, no hair that flew around in the wind like ours did, no silhouette or clothes. Though this time our friends saw it too. They all stopped in their tracks, freaked out. We started hearing something running towards us from the forest behind us. Eventually one of them started running toward the house, and the others followed. I stayed. I kept shining the light on the figure. I tried to find any kind of explanation. I wanted to go up to it, to see what it was, to see if it would react. But the running behind me got louder. Eventually I remembered that there are wolves in this part of the forest, and that's when I tucked tail and ran after the others. When I reached the house, the others were staring behind me, so I looked back as well. This time both of the figures were standing there, unmoving. Inside the house we told the others, and noted that everyone was still here. It couldn't have been a prank by them. I was considering whether or not it could have been a prank by one of the camping people. But they were on the other side of the lake and pretty much all of them are older people, so I very much doubt that. And if it was one of them, we would have seen hair, clothes, and facial features when I used my friend's flashlight. We would have seen breathing movements and light swaying, since nobody can stand completely still, and they couldn't have been that tall. If it were cardboard cutouts or similar, we would have noticed with the lights, but no. Those things were completely black. Black like the void, the light did nothing but lighten up the places around them. I believe those things were shadow people, and no prank. And I'm still terrified to go back to that place. Edit, for those wondering, there are no bears or moose in the area, and if it was an animal, shining the bright flashlight at it would have revealed the fur of any kind of creature. Instead, the light just didn't touch them, only the surroundings. Plus, they didn't have a shadow behind them. It could have been some animals in the bushes that made the noises, though. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, Episode 80. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, for those wondering, the votes are in, and it seemed almost overwhelmingly you guys would like the revenge-themed video this Sunday, so that's what we're going to do. I've got plenty of stories there to be going on with, and I've even got a couple of extra feelers out. So we'll get, we may even end up with enough for two of those videos, so we'll see what happens. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, because it's awful late and I'm getting a bit peckish. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.